Yeah, my name's Barry Faucett, and I'm the director of Prevent Suicide West Virginia, which serves the lifespan. And I am fortunate enough, and most of you would not be surprised to be here with Michelle Toman today. We are traveling through multiple counties in West Virginia this week doing generally suicide prevention, upstream prevention, and then some postvention as prevention to multiple counties again, starting Sunday and ending Friday night. So we're in transit from what, Calhoun to Webster, and so
getting ready to hit our third Airbnb because there's no hotels where we are.
So yeah, but we want to spend a little bit of time talking about postvention. Again, we realize this is brief. I do have some slides I can share. Let's see here. Let me see if I could get to what I want. Share. Why is it not on there? Oh, here we are. There we go. Okay. Oh, let's go backwards. So I am going to share a few slides and just explain that these are from, you got the backwards view there, that these are from a postvention training academy that Michelle and I offer. We've done a couple in the state, and generally they last a day and a half because it's a pretty intensive topic that's all inclusive and very comprehensive. And to talk in a brief time period, we're just going to share a few things. I do want to acknowledge that good postvention can really have an impact on prevention. It is a requirement of state legislation that you have a suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention policy for higher ed, in addition to recognition of resources being 988 and 741 on student IDs, as well as some postings. I'm sure you're well aware on your website and where an individual can get resources. But I just think that we need to acknowledge that. And Michelle can definitely, I want to allow her to introduce herself and share a little bit of insight into Jamie's Law.
So for those that don't know, Jamie was my brother that Jamie's Law is named after. And it's essentially us trying to make the world a better and safer place as a result of us doing everything wrong when he was struggling. So Jamie was a freshman in college, very transitional time. We lose a lot of freshmen in college, that front lobe of the brain being not fully developed yet and all the things. But yeah, it's incredible to be able to see the work that's been done as a result. So many lives saved as a result of, his life lost. I always say I didn't care if they called it the dirty dishwater law. As long as the work got done, we can't change that story. But if we can keep those other stories from ending tragically like that, I think that's the important piece. And prevention's always going to be our best, or education's always going to be our best form of prevention. But the postvention piece is critical. One, I know what it's like to need it. I know what it was like for his friends to need it. They still struggle today as a result of there not being any postvention 30 years ago. And it's just a critical component to the piece. It's really, I don't know how to say it other than I feel like we're being really irresponsible if we don't do postvention.
Well, with that acknowledgement, before we get to the slide, I do want to identify, and anybody who knows us know we're really passionate and we definitely walk the talk of what we do. But we have a lot of losses, unfortunately, in our state in higher ed to suicides, or we have attempts. And then there is no reaction, and no response is a response. And even though the university, we might offer some kind of postvention support, technical assistance, consultation, and I would also say that this sprinkles to secondary education as well. But there's like, we've got it handled, we could take care of it, but then the students call us and the staff call us and the community calls us and says, why aren't they doing anything? So it's really important that we do implement comprehensive postvention plans, and not to be identifying, But one of the graphics that was appeared here prior to this was a means of a suicide by a West Virginia higher ed student just a couple of years ago. And so we're really careful about anything that we share. And I heard Carolyn's, comment about not being identifying, but they are identified in the community. We know where people die by suicide. They call us.
West Virginia.
Yeah, the kids know who it is, the students know who it is, and the campuses know who it is. And we've had colleges and universities where there's been multiple deaths by suicide over the last couple of years, and never postvention, at least for campus students, outside of counseling services for those affected. So with that said, postvention is comprehensive. It involves campus-wide communication. It involves coordination with community supports and resources in order to provide for stability. It involves effective outreach, and it involves crisis services or clinical services for those affected, those who have lost somebody they love previously, those who are already currently struggling with suicidal ideation or have attempt history, as well as those in the greater community, perhaps that were part of their sorority or fraternity or team or classes. Like it's really comprehensive. And another thing I want to note, because we've recently been, I guess, requested to do policies and procedures. And we can write policies and procedures for postvention, but practice what you preach is really important. So there's not one size fits all to postvention. It's super individualized. It's dependent upon the reach of the individual's life as to how the reach of their death affects individuals. And then we need to define the impact on a real-time schedule or acknowledgement. So again, it's everybody wants to have this policy. And I mean, I can reference multiple policies and toolkits, et cetera, that are available, but there really needs to be a flexible but coordinated collaborative plan in place to provide for postvention. So I'm going to let you do prevention, intervention, postvention.
So we even have schools, both higher ed and secondary, that'll reach out to us and say, hey, we're trying to get all of our ducks in a row, and will you check out this letter and make sure that it's appropriate if and when we lose someone.
Yeah.
Why prepare that in advance? I mean, I get that there needs to be some core components, or we get that there needs some core components, but would any of us want that to be our life lost in the organization and within which we serve? No. And every individual life lost, specifically and especially this way, deserves that immediate real-time response, as Barri said. So prevention, intervention, postvention takes all three to be able to encompass the whole system. Prevention, as you know, is trying to stop something before it happens. Intervention is trying to stop something as it's happening. And postvention is us trying to, prevent contagion, glorification, be able to provide that extra level of love and support. And we even explain this as, with youth, depending on the age appropriate as where we're at, like where we're headed to today. For the next 2 days with middle and high school students, we will say, what is prevention? What is intervention? What is postvention? We'll explain it in accordance with whatever, if they're middle or high, are they getting a retainer after they get braces on their teeth? That's postvention, and it's extra level of love, care, and support. The braces are the intervention, the teeth cleanings are the prevention, all those things. And even with school speed zones, and they can break it down. So just knowing the difference and knowing where you are and what realm you're in. And for example, we're headed to postvention setting 30 days out to do, extra level of care and support to do prevention work. But we have to be mindful that we're in the postvention setting, and the trauma and shock is, there and present, and grief is present. To be able to do that prevention, and how much of the prevention are they going to be able to encompass as we're delivering this 30 days after a tragic life loss. So we're not going to give them a whole program. No. We're going to give them what they need in the postvention setting. And again, we use evidence and science behind everything we do. But knowing the difference, defining that impact, and then even being honest with whoever we're doing it with about it. that safe, honest, meaningful conversation part. That's I think that's the most responsible way to do it.
Agreed.
And we're prepared to do interventions while we're there.
Well, and and again, that's why you have to be skilled in all three to do any of it. You can't, it's irresponsible to do prevention without intervention. An example of that is I would never let any individual that works under my supervision to do a prevention table and not know how to do intervention. That's irresponsible, because oftentimes individuals see that invitation to talk about suicide, and then they might share their story or currently be at risk. And we need to be equipped to be able to provide an intervention at that moment, place, and time, versus, hey, just call this number and hope you stay alive. So we're really careful about how we do that. And again, postvention is prevention. I just want to acknowledge, because we don't want to be irresponsible, we did provide immediate postvention technical consultation and support.
This is the follow-up.
Yeah, to that school county system when that happened. We just happened to be booked months in advance and just weren't able to break free from other obligations we had for postvention. So again, just want to acknowledge the importance of postvention, in that generally after a suicide death, especially for those at risk, there's a 2-week heightened period of contagion for individuals to act on suicidal ideation or urges to die by suicide. And I think that's super important. And again, hence is the responsibility of doing appropriate, well-informed postvention education. And so, yes, we do get a bit frustrated when we hear directly about suicide deaths and nothing's been done at a local level to provide for postvention. A couple of things about postvention. It is prevention. You've heard that before. We're going to give you a little brief snapshot. Again, this is an excerpt of a 1.5 day training that we do on postvention, but there is active, delayed, and passive postvention, and then there's phases of postvention, and those are basically to stabilize the community and the school system, to allow for grief, and then also allow for growth in the further out setting. So I think that's important to note. So there are crisis management and postvention go hand in hand, and this can be applicable to things outside of postvention for suicide, I think should be important to note. But the 3 Ps obviously are people. We need to protect the people. We need to perception, ensure the alignment of the response, and then participation. And that participation investigation is really conveying appropriate information to individuals. Oftentimes when there's a suicide, a lot of things things get started that can create unsafe conditions. And so ensuring that there's clear, concise, factual information is really important. You want to do 4 Cs?
And then always those 4 Cs or the 5 Cs, we could add 47 or 500 Cs actually. Communication, coordination, collaboration, and cooperation. And again, the concern, commitment, competency, clarity, and then the confidence of the people that doing it. Not everybody wants to do it. And it takes a competent person to be able to do it. And also that all of those C's are critical, but I guess that's the only C we don't have on there. But collaboration is also important. Who's going to be in charge? Who's, who all can we bring in? Sometimes we see places say, no, we're just going to have such and such on standby. And if we get overwhelmed, we'll call them. Well, then it's too late. When you're overwhelmed, you're overwhelmed. Have all hands on deck. And if you only need half of them to be able to help, then that's great. You only needed half of them. But once we're overwhelmed, we're overwhelmed. And it's really hard also, I think, to point out that it's difficult for these places. I mean, put yourself in there now. And I know you've had to do it. When you needed help in the postvention realm, and you shouldn't have had to been the one to provide it.
Yes.
It's also important to be able to know that we're human, we're not robots. And, we lost an individual 2 years ago, and it was one of my best and dearest friend's son to suicide. And there was a significant amount of postvention that needed to be done, and I was wrecked. I couldn't do it. And I had to, for the first time in my life, be able to say, I can't do this. But I knew who to get a hold of, and we were still able to provide it. And it's okay to be able to do that, because it's crucial that it's done safely. So all of those C's being in there, because we don't want to have regret, which is the first R. And even though that's not what that R means, we want to make sure that we always show remorse for the event also. It's not, there's another one, let's go. We're just, checking boxes and going through the thing. That doesn't feel good to anybody. And sometimes even we, and I say this as a survivor of loss, it doesn't taste good, but sometimes we've even been like in the middle of something, and then we hear of another one, and we tend to go on to the next thing. But we really truly try to stop ourselves and say, no, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. Even if it's just us together on the road, we're going to hold on to this hurt for a minute, show remorse for that event. And we especially need the people doing the work to do that. And then the reason and remedy, we need to always be able to share a solution and resolve with our communication, and sharing that this is never the answer, and reasoning with clarifying what happened. Not all stories are ours to tell, but only sharing accurate information while protecting the individual and the family.
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge here as well in regards to the sharing. So West Virginia is small. Maybe your universities, colleges, and I'm saying everybody in West Virginia hasn't reached out to us directly, but the people in the community have. And oftentimes it's like, well, that kid was off campus, or that happened in a place in our region, but not at our university. And so it's like the responsibility is not accepted, that this was a student that attended your place. So, well, they died by suicide when they were home on break. Well, it still was your student, and people are affected. So I understand we're talking to people who really care here, but sometimes people just go through the motions and check off the box and say we're doing this, until it happens on your campus or to your person, and then it really matters to you. So I think that it's just important that we have the right people at the table that really care and are considerate, and again, that you involve those outside agencies like Michelle said, because you can have a policy, but if it's your person or your student, then you've got your grief and shock and all of the associated feelings as well, and are not in a particular capable place of being able to provide for postvention. I'm mindful of the time, but we'll go ahead and
ring theory. If you want to take a screenshot of anything, take a picture of that. Just remember here who is most affected. Those that are most affected are often at the core of that circle, are often the ones that don't get reached out to during postvention. It can be uncomfortable to reach to a family, but it's critical. Nobody is affected as much as that closest circle. And then those circles each represent, who we need to be reaching out to. We can offer things for the community, but if the right people don't show up, and we don't really reach way into those most affected, no matter how uncomfortable, then comfort doesn't get put in there. So our ring theory and sharing is what gets dumped in is what gets dumped out. And if you don't put any, I don't say you, if we don't put anything good in to all of those components, all of the rings, then what's going to come out is going to be negativity. And we see that over and over and over again. So it's just something to be mindful of, because our response matters, and who we're responding to matters also.
And with that said too, I also want to acknowledge that, like Michelle said, the individuals affected most closely. So if an individual is off-site or another state, connecting that family to resources is vital, because they are going to be the most at risk. So, and it's our responsibility to serve the families and loved ones of the people that we lose. So there are a couple of phases of postvention. Again, you could look up anything to find them, but we're going to go through them really, really quickly, mindful of time. But there's an immediate acute phase. That's generally the 24 hours. And so we need to acknowledge the crisis and contain it. Initial response, set the tone, confirm points of contact, and everybody has a role of task. A rule of thumb there is it should not be an individual, but rather a position, because people change, turnover occurs. We don't want everybody to be dependent upon one person for sustainability considerations. So it needs to be this office, this office, this office. It should by any means not only be a counseling office. I came from a clinical psych background and was not trained in how to do appropriate postvention. So just because I have letters behind my name or I have a certain degree does not mean I'm better equipped. And in fact, I'm not as equipped as Michelle Toman to do postvention. So we need to acknowledge it's everyone's responsibility. It needs to be coordinated. Obviously, notify, protect, and respect privacy. So the only time specific to secondary schools when we try to do postvention a little bit more discreetly is if the families don't want to acknowledge that a suicide death occurred. Communicate those risks for contagion. Again, you identify those key populations. There's various, again, I mentioned them already, sorority, clubs they were associated with, circles they ran in, as well as at-risk individuals, and then offer organized and practical assistance and resources. Then the short term is 48 to 72 hours. Those most affected, support and promote healthy grieving, provide for care stations and funeral activities. So care station is not where you don't want to visit classrooms and say we lost this individual, but ensure if you've been affected or you feel like you need to talk to somebody, create a supportive environment that's heavily manned. In other words, like Michelle said, we don't just want 2 or 3 people there. We want multiple people there. We need to coordinate a schedule if people can't be there for certain periods of times. Unfortunately, we are very good at this.
Sadly,
I say that again, unfortunately, we are very good at this and have done it multiple times throughout our state. And Michelle's provided a lot of national support for postvention as well. And then we do want to try to get back to some type of routine. But with that additional supports. And then finally, longer term. So honoring the individual who died by suicide, there are lots of parameters or recommendations regarding that so as to not glorify or promote contagion. And then finally, this is what we're doing this week, unfortunately, transition of postvention to prevention. And but here's the deal. We don't want to show up for postvention anywhere. We need to do what we're responsibly charged to do and provide for prevention and intervention on our campuses across, as well as, community and technical centers, college or community centers for colleges across our state, because it's just, it needs to be done. We lost 353 individuals to suicide in 2022 in West Virginia. That's almost one a day. And we're not talking about it. That doesn't even acknowledge the intercept of those who died by intentional overdoses as well, that were suicides and just not measured that way according to how we count and classify lives lost. So and again, we can name the names on and I say yours in West Virginia, colleges and universities over the last few years, and there are many.
And so last year, I haven't done any college campus prevention this year, but sometimes I'll go to certain places that are special to me if they ask.
I'll skip that.
And there was an individual that came up at a very small campus and said, I am grateful to know, it was during freshman orientation, he said, I am grateful to know that the campus that and the college that I've committed to my life to the next 4 years to is doing this, because I almost didn't come here. I made an attempt to end my own life 3 weeks ago. And so it's so important. And those stories of lives saved are shared with us over and over and over again. So thank you to those of you that are going the extra mile and providing those prevention components.
So I want to talk just a little bit about some of the things that we do. So prevention efforts across our state are diversified, and we utilize a lot of different things, but we've developed the SAVE cards, which is an outreach program for colleges and universities. That is a preventive measure that we can do. I think it's important to acknowledge. We've been around for a while. We've been doing this for a long time. So
Since
though
Jesus
we
was a
utilize
baby.
a lot of evidence-based programs, we're in the process of developing some new best practice programs in application of the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, because there's a lot of people that get nothing, and nothing's not good enough. So another thing that I think is effective intervention, and we've done some trainings on it, is everyone here, especially if you're associated with mental health on your campus, obviously should be trained in safety planning. It is a brief mini intervention, but it's a universal practice that's just not done across our state, and we've seen it to save lives time and time again. So we have some templates of some safety plans that we've developed, and again, you could look them up, but you need to just ensure that you do a comprehensive safety plan when anyone's at risk, as well as some of the outreach stuff that you could do. We have Meet Them in the Middle, suicide intervention skills training. Again, did I mute? So I came from a clinical background and was not taught intervention. So we're mindful of the time that you've given us, but just want to know that we hope everybody has all 3 tiers of suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention, because unfortunately, we do fatality review. Oh yeah.
Just keep talking.
She's just going to
I'm
show
just
you.
gonna show.
In the instance of we can look back very quickly and know exactly where there were gaps and what we could have done better. And it's not a blame or shame game, but it's, we want to save lives. So to not be able to ask the question about suicide or respond to that or provide for an intervention when it's at your real time, we can do better with that. We can be trained in that. And so we hope never to serve you in the postvention realm, and serve you in prevention and intervention. And again, be there if you need anything, but just wanted to ensure that you had access to some of the information in the event that you might ever need it. And there's our contact information. You can take a picture if you want, or Carolyn knows how to contact me and let me know if you need anything on your university or campus.
All right, thank you guys very much. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. So first of all, where do you get those resources that you like, the safety plan?
Yes.
Okay, so in your website, because I just went to.
Oh, are you muted?
Yeah, I'm not.
Don't go to the website. It's crap. I'm in the process of redoing it. It looks awful right now.
Okay.
I had it pulled down last week and we just haven't had enough hours in the day. But send an email
to Michelle,
and I can send you some options of what you want.
Okay. Excellent. Can you throw up your email again or put it in the chat? The other question I had, it was about communication. So last year we had a student that passed away from a cardiac event. And I think there's always kind of there was a struggle between our communications department, as well as all the students knew what was happening. We have the communications department being really cautious. We have trying to respect the family's need for space and their wishes for communication. What do you see as most effective with communicating to the student body, to people affected, kind of dealing with all of those different, entities? And
my answer. Mm-hmm. So, with my regular life and personal experiences both. So it's important to, and sometimes it takes a half a day or a whole day to be able to put an appropriate response together that might only be 4 to 6 sentences. Mm-hmm. And protecting who you need to protect and what you need to protect, and taking consideration the permission or what you don't have permission to share, but acknowledging the loss of life. You don't have to say how. You know what I mean? When it's a suicide and we have permission to share that, it is important to acknowledge that, you know, that it was suicide when we can, and we can't always, but there are messages we can send that say that without saying that. If you're struggling or whatever, that message always is helpful. But just, I think taking the time to be as honest as you can with as few details as you can is critical. And in being honest, sometimes my husband's a superintendent of schools, and sometimes we spend a whole day on something literally when, you know, when catastrophe strikes or tragedy, on a 4-sentence thing, making sure that it's appropriate or and so that we don't further injure other individuals. So it takes time. It takes time and just a lot of effort, and then putting that out, whether it's social media, and then leaving it up there, and then saying we'll be available through the week, you know, or for the next 3 days, because the day of the week something happens matters how long the postvention goes on too. If it happens on a Sunday or Monday, you better be ready to set up camp for till Friday. If it happens on a Thursday, and I'm not saying we're lucky when things happen on the weekend, but when it happens on Thursday or, you know, or midweek, then we don't have to be there as long. So just treating it very individualized, I think probably would be my 2 cents.
That's actually, it's really validating to hear, like, it's okay that this takes time, because I think what happens is, like, the students know this is going down and they're like, why isn't the school doing anything? And there was a lot of work going on behind the scenes of like, okay, what is the message that we need to send out?
And sometimes in that moment, I think, and again, I'm not a doctor, lawyer, counselor, but being able to say, you know, unfortunately, we're heartbroken at the tragedy that has occurred, because that's what it is regardless. And they acknowledge it, and please stay posted, or we're keep in touch, watch our social media or whatever. We're working on postvention planning for anyone who may need extra support. And then that gives you a little bit of time to, or at least a day. You know, the daytime hours or the rest of the nighttime hours to get your head wrapped around what you need to do and provide and get all the people in place. That's just my 2 cents.
No, I totally agree. Like, we need to acknowledge it as immediate as we know about it, but then just that there are plans forthcoming and that we're going to execute or whatever. That's a terrible word. I shouldn't have used that.
Well, and because people think if they know about it, then they want to know immediately what the response is. And it takes, you know, they know about it probably before you know about it. So just acknowledging it as quickly as possible, and just sharing that you're going to have a better response later.
But if you do acknowledge it, like Michelle said, at least you're validating your students' worth and concern and that kind of thing. So they are like, we do matter. This is important. Our school does care about us and the people that we lose or that are struggling, et cetera. So I think that's super important.
Great. Thank you so much.
I have a question. It's like, it's off topic a little bit, but not really. So I noticed, you know, when you see an interview on TV or the radio and they talk about suicide, then they'll say, you know, if anybody's feeling any certain kind of way, you know, you call 988, and, you know, they offer that as sort of and I was just wondering, so when you're having a discussion about it, say in a class, or say this, for instance, you know, because I was remembering a friend of mine from my freshman year in college. It was very, very long time ago. But like, it saddened me. And then when we were talking about it, I really, you know, so I was just wondering, like, what's a good debrief for something like that besides, hey, just call 988 does that make sense?
Absolutely. So again, can I answer?
Yeah.
Sorry. I have a lot of experience in death and grief.
Too.
And we have the same answers. But I think being able to even say, you know, so one of the things that we put out, if you get on Webster County High School's social media today or their school website, you're going to see a little infographic that's for support. Took a little bit to come up with the right words, but that says, you know, postvention support is available. And safety planning is available. And that's what we're going to do. Because there may be people at this point that need an intervention. So even saying that, we put the crisis line and text line on there also, but to let you know that, hey, you know, and all of our safety planning has the crisis text line and lifeline also. So that they have resources 24/7. But being prepared and being comfortable with saying, hey, we're happy to help make a plan of safety for you if anyone needs it.
Yeah, I kind of think too, just acknowledging, this is a really hard thing to talk about in training or whatever, especially, and most of us know somebody or know of somebody, if not know them personally, which is sad. It's kind of like at the beginning of opioid, when the first opioid overdoses were happening, people would ask that question to start off and talk like, how many people do you know? Who knows somebody? You know what I mean? And now it's really, so yeah, I would just say that acknowledgement too is probably a good.
Acknowledge and inquire if, are you thinking about suicide?
Yeah,
This could be overwhelming. Sometimes when people have lost somebody they love to suicide or in the community and they're having concerns with mental health or a significant life stressor, etc., they're thinking about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? We do not ask that question enough in everyday conversation. And that's why we're losing people. It's just, we were just in the Midwest Suicide Prevention Conference last week, and that was, this should be a daily conversation and a question that's easy to ask as, how's your day? And I know that it can be intimidating, but, acknowledging and opening that door for someone who's already dealing with significant life events as well as grief or concerns with mental health is super important and vital.
Well, another piece of that I would add is we don't hesitate to say, have you lost weight?
Right.
You look great. Have you lost weight? Now, of course, we shouldn't say, have you gained weight, Michelle? Or I don't want you to if you see me, but we stick our nose in people's business in a negative way every day for everything. We're in their religion, we're in their politics, we're all up in their business for how unhealthy they're eating or whatever the things are. And this is life or death, and we can't undo dead. And so we need to be able to, we call it being the good kind of nosy.
Yeah.
And just, hey, are you okay? And I'm worried about you. I'm concerned about you.
I think that word is getting out because I've witnessed 2 different people ask that question when something kind of came up, and I thought that was really cool. Like that's something new that you didn't hear before, and it's a little weird to hear it. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't to me, but it was just general, and I was like, it was neat though because I was like, that's the information that's being put out. So I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you, and I'll be quiet.
Oh yeah.
I have a question for you all. If there are campuses that are interested in your 1.5 day postvention training, is that something that they can schedule with maybe their behavior intervention team or, some schools have mental health task force or another group like that? Or is that something do your preventionists that are out in the regions do that training? How does that work? And is there a cost associated for campuses?
So yes and yes, or yes in regards to schedule directly with us. And I'll tell you why there is a cost associated. So these trainings, anything I do is in kind right now, right? So When Life Goes, Meet Them in the Middle is a part of a different training center or center of excellence Michelle and I have created over the course of the last almost
15
years. Because we do a lot of national work for other individuals in other states who are invested in suicide prevention. The reason there's a cost associated, and you go directly through Michelle, is anything that I do under any funding of mine is in kind. But Michelle, I can't pay Michelle to do her travel or materials or any of that. So that cost for those trainings are a result of her fees, as well as materials to cover her travel, hotels, etc. So yes, there is a cost associated because we know that there is funding available. And I'll tell you that Meet Them in the Middle came as a result of individuals not wanting to do a 2-day intervention skills training. We've worked again with researchers to find something that's really applicable to 1 day, but is all inclusive of the components of responsible intervention. And so that's where that came from. And we've done that across the state and a couple surrounding states as well.
And being honest, and I would never knock anybody's programming. We didn't create it to be second best. It's the best of the best. We want it to be the best. We do interventions. I do interventions almost every day, much to my dismay. I don't want to, but I'm grateful to be able to. And I truly feel like, and we do, when you do the work and you know what's needed, then it's not valuable to share and hold, or to not share and hold that information. And I'll say this too, I'm terrible when it comes to funding. I work 2 and 3 jobs and have for the last 30 years to be able to help provide suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention efforts for West Virginia. So I spend personally about $100,000 a year in West Virginia doing the work. So I would never allow money to keep me from doing the work. I'll find a way. I'll do DoorDash or whatever I got to do. If you don't have the money, I don't ever want that to interfere with people not having the information or education that they need to save lives. So but if
there's funding,
if there's funding, it
available,
helps
that's
because
getting spent on things that people are just handing out that are meaningless and not useful, then absolutely to reimburse Michelle's efforts.
I can't find a gas station that says you're doing great things. Fill up your car for free, lady.
Right.
So at campus, their first step would be to reach out to you and let you know they're potentially interested, and then you can work with them on pricing for that training from there based on what they have available through grants.
And if campuses could pull together, we would rather make the best use of our travel time and do a regional. And it's a much more richer experience. And then you've got those other people, you're all speaking the same language. And if something happens, then you can depend on each other, when life does go sideways.
And there are ways that our grant does contribute costs, and that
absolutely.
is securing venues and that kind of thing. There's just a fine line in what we're able and not able to spend our designated grant dollars towards. So we have to, but again, my participation's in kind as a result of our grant right now. And it takes 2 of us to do anything. I wouldn't do any of it without her. And it's all our content and material, but they are incredible trainings. We see them make a difference. And it's just really important that everybody knows how to do the right thing to ensure that we don't continue to lose our people, because suicide's preventable when we know what to do.
Yeah. And there is nothing, I'm going to choke a little bit. There is nothing I won't do to help save lives on college campuses. We just didn't know as a family how to do that when my brother was struggling, and his college campus didn't either. And we're 30 years out. Like, we know better today, and families and those students deserve better. We can't help what we don't know when we don't know it. We say that all the time, but no dead kid needs a college education. So thank you for what you're doing already.
Yeah, and thank you for making this a priority today.
And Martha, you're good. You just went back,
okay.
And that's you went back, and there we go.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you both. It's pretty deep and heavy to home whenever you guys put everything into perspective and everything, so people can relate to it. I was a high school teacher, and fortunately I was blessed in the area I was with students. My friend was a middle school teacher, and she had two students pass while she was there from being bullied and stuff. So
yeah, and it sucks that we're going to middle school. Well, we're going to a county in which an individual died by suicide not too long ago, and that's not what we want to do.
Yeah, and with the bullying, I mean, our postvention efforts even, and we have so much, unfortunately, postvention stuff, but it is prevention at the same time, and it's better. At least we're able to do something, because sometimes nothing's done until it's too late, and
that's not good enough.
And that's not good enough. If we can have people stuck in outer space, this is my analogy. If we can have people stuck in outer space, and then we can send other people to go get the stuck people from outer space, this is not that difficult.
Right.
This isn't as hard as that.
Right.
Is it uncomfortable? Heck yeah, it absolutely can be. But
is it doable?
It's doable, absolutely. And you're welcome.
So if you need anything from us, you've got our contact info, and we're happy to do whatever we can to help your people.
thank you guys so much.
Thank you all.
We appreciate having you.
Thanks for everybody coming today too. Really appreciate all of the attendance today and the questions and discussion. Candace and I are always available here at HEPC if you have follow-up or feedback from the session. Also, there's an evaluation that you'll get emailed by Kelly after the session. So please feel free to give us feedback on any of the echo sessions, and topics that you want to hear in more depth or that you want to hear in our spring. We're getting ready to get our spring curriculum together. So keep that in mind. But thank you all. And I'll turn it back over to Kelly for any final comments.
All right, guys. Our next session will be December 4th. Then in November is Thanksgiving, so you guys get a little bit of a break there. So December 4th, we'll have Digital Wellness 2.0 with Lori Fritsch. So we will see you all then.